The Institute of Museum and Library Services Native American Native Hawaiian Museum Services Information Session. My name is Sarah Glass. I'm a Senior Program Officer in the Office of Museum Services, and I'm happy that you're interested in preparing an application for the IMLS Native American Native Hawaiian Museum Services Grant Program. I will be referring to the program throughout this presentation as NANH, the abbreviation of the program title. My goal in this presentation is to provide specific information about the NANH grant program and make some recommendations that you may wish to consider when preparing your application. Since this is a pre-recorded webinar and you won't have the opportunity to ask questions, feel free to contact me or any of the other staff in the Office of Museum Services to seek answers to your questions or to discuss a project idea. The staff contact slide is shown later in this webinar. This is one of a series of pre-recorded webinars designed to help you find the information you need to create a competitive application for IMLS museum funding. Choosing a funding opportunity for FY2023 was pre-recorded and is available as a video and as a PDF of the slides, plus as a transcript on our website at the link identified here. In that webinar, we cover the IMLS vision, mission, and strategic plan with an emphasis on how they influence our grant making. We also address institutional eligibility, provide a quick overview of all of our funding opportunities, how to find information online with a focus on our website, and we cover the 2 places you must be registered in order to apply for an IMLS grant. We strongly recommend that you view this webinar to get the complete picture of preparing and submitting a competitive application to the NANH program. In addition to this NANH webinar, we are providing pre-recorded webinars for all of our museum grant programs. You can find links to these on the grant program landing pages on our website. We're often asked about the number of applications and funding success rates. So here are the figures for the past 5 years for this program. As you can see, NANH has had a somewhat consistent increase in appropriated funding over time. We seek to award the strongest proposals with the greatest potential to strengthen tribal museum services. Looking back to the beginning of the program in 2005, the first year we made awards, we have since received 635 applications. Of those, 416 have received grants, which has totaled over $21 million in funding to support the museum services of tribes, Alaskan Native villages and corporations, and Native Hawaiian serving organizations. To date, awards have been made under this program to organizations located in 30 states. In this presentation, I'll be addressing the following topics: program goals and eligibility, characteristics of successful NANH projects, important dates and times, the questions of how much you may request in funding, how many applications you may submit, and how long your project can last, examples of allowable and unallowable costs, application components, application tips, the review process, and IMLS staff contact information. Let's begin with the NANH program goals. The overall goal of the NANH program is to support projects that enhance museum services in order to assist tribes, Alaska Natives, and organizations that primarily serve Native Hawaiians to provide opportunities to sustain heritage, culture, and knowledge through strengthened activities in areas such as exhibitions, educational services and programming, professional development, and collection stewardship. Since it is designed to serve Indian tribes, Alaska Natives, and Native Hawaiians, the NANH program has unique eligibility criteria from other museum grant programs offered at IMLS. I encourage you to read the specific eligibility criteria noted on our website and in the notice of funding opportunity, and contact us with any questions. Here are some more details on the eligibility requirements for the NANH program. An organization is eligible to apply to this program if they are a federally recognized Indian tribe as identified by the Bureau of Indian Affairs, an Alaskan Native village or corporation, or a nonprofit organization that primarily serves and represents Native Hawaiians. In most circumstances, other entities such as museums, libraries, cultural centers, schools, tribal colleges, or departments of education are not eligible to apply on their own. However, the 3 types of eligible entities listed here are welcome to partner with those non-eligible entities or organizations. The applicant for the grant must meet the eligibility criteria, but the partners are not required to do so. What are characteristics of successful Native American, Native Hawaiian Museum Services applications? There are 4, and successful projects address all of them well. As you prepare your application, you should keep these characteristics in mind. First, institutional impact. Your project should address a key need or challenge that faces your organization. Second, in-depth knowledge. Your proposal should reflect a thorough understanding of current practice and knowledge about the subject matter. Third, project-based design. Your work plan should consist of a set of logical, interrelated activities tied directly to addressing the key need or challenge. And fourth, demonstrable results. Your project should generate measurable results that tie directly to the need or challenge it was designed to address. It has been our experience that an unfunded application is one that has failed to deliver convincingly on one or more of these. So it's a good idea to think about how you structure your application to show how your project will be strong in each. I want to remind you of important dates for NANH applications. They are due by 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time on November 15th, 2022. This deadline is non-negotiable and the timestamp is auto-generated by the grants.gov system. You will hear this again and again, but start early and submit early. That way, if you encounter a difficulty of any kind when submitting your proposal, you'll have some time to resolve the problem. After undergoing a peer review process, NANH awards will be announced in June 2023, and projects must be scheduled to start July 1st, 2023. Please make sure everyone involved in preparing your grant application is aware of these dates. NANH applicants can request anywhere from $5,000 to $100,000 in grant funds. If you ask for less than $5,000 or more than $100,000, your application will be rejected and not reviewed. There is no cost share requirement, though you may include one if your organization will contribute funds towards this particular project. It's important to note that if you decide to include a cost share in your application, it must be met by the end of the award. We will hold you to that figure, so keep that in mind when applying. Cost share can be in the form of cash, staff or volunteer time, or third-party contributions. It may not be funds from another federal source. In terms of how many applications you may submit, there's no limit to the number of applications you can file in response to the FY23 funding announcement for the NANH program. However, you'll want to consider your organization's capacity, not just to write and submit multiple strong proposals, but then to manage multiple federal awards at once. And finally, how long may a project last? NANH projects must be at least 1 year, but may not exceed 3 years in length. I have used the term project here several times, so let's take a minute to consider exactly what that means. The Project Management Institute has a good definition. This is a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product, service, or result. They go on to further explain that a project is temporary because it has a defined beginning and end in time, and therefore defined scope and resources. And a project is unique in that it is not a routine operation, but rather a specific set of activities designed to accomplish a singular goal. We recommend that you keep this definition in mind as you conceptualize your IMLS project. Think of it as a temporary, non-routine set of activities, which collectively have a beginning and an end in time, a defined scope requiring specific resources, and which are designed to accomplish a specific singular goal. This slide shows a list of many types of projects we can fund under the NANH program, and we invite you to develop and apply for projects that best meet your tribe's or institution's needs. Remember, the overall goal of the NANH program is to assist tribes, Alaskan Natives, and Native Hawaiian organizations to enhance their museum services and provide opportunities to sustain their heritage, culture, and knowledge. You are not necessarily required to have a physical museum or cultural center in order to provide these types of services. While there are technically no project categories for the NANH program, it does have several primary goals and objectives, which are linked to the overarching goals of the IMLS strategic plan. We cover these in the Choosing a Funding Opportunity webinar, and they are to champion lifelong learning, strengthen community engagement, and advance collection stewardship and access. I will review the NANH goals and objectives in the next 3 slides, and you should keep these in mind as you prepare your application. Each NANH program goal has a set of objectives, which essentially provide a list of the types of projects that fit within that goal. So a project that aligns with Goal 1 might include, but is not limited to, program development for all types of audiences, all or part of an exhibit, creating interpretive plans, training for teachers, partnerships with schools or out-of-school audiences, program evaluation, and professional development opportunities for the Native American, Native Alaskan, and Native Hawaiian museum workforce. These types of projects should start with the concept of learner at the center and build around it. Spend time really thinking through who your learners in this project are and what their needs are. It's likely not going to be everybody, so who is it really? What do they want to learn? What do you want them to learn? And what's the best way to go about that? We'll get to the idea of problems and needs in a few minutes, but a major takeaway here is to be focused on identifying your target audience and thinking about how you are going to serve them. A project that aligns with Goal 2 is likely to include activities that contribute directly to your work to build the capacity of your museum services within your tribe or organization. Projects might include, but are not limited to, institutional planning and policy development, the recruitment and development of museum staff, and the enhancement of technology, such as your website or necessary software and hardware for museum operations. Projects that align with Goal 3 include just about anything you need to do for and with your collections except acquire them. We are very open to projects that have multiple components configured in ways that make sense for you. One project might consist of cataloging, taking digital photographs, and updating database records, while another might combine digitization activities with rehousing. We support conservation projects of all kinds, from general, detailed, and environmental surveys to conservation treatments and environmental improvements. And you're welcome to incorporate aspects of training or collections management into these projects if doing so makes sense for your situation. We also support projects focused on preserving and perpetuating Native language or traditional cultural practices, including archival documentation, oral histories, or repatriation efforts. It's important to note that with collections and conservation-focused projects, we encourage a step-by-step and progressive approach. This means addressing needs, creating a prioritized list of activities, and following through by doing the most important and logical things first. We'll turn now to types of allowable and unallowable costs for your project. Be careful when preparing your proposal to only include allowable costs in your federal funding request and any cost share you choose to provide. Including unallowable costs can hurt your chances of getting positive reviews and being recommended for funding. We'll go through some common expenses that are allowable and unallowable, but for details, you'll want to consult the federal regulations that govern federal awards. We call these 2 CFR 200 for short, but the full title is Title 2, Subtitle A, Chapter 2, Part 200, Uniform Administrative Requirements, Cost Principles, and Audit Requirements for Federal Awards. I know that sounds like a mouthful, but these regulations contain important guidance that all federal grant applicants and recipients should be aware of. Fortunately, they're available online in a searchable format via the U.S. Government Publishing Office website listed on the screen. Of particular interest for the topic of allowable or unallowable costs is Subpart E, Cost Principles, a small section of which is shown on the right side of this slide. Here's a partial list of some common examples of allowable costs. The same list can be found in Section B6A of the NANH Notice of Funding Opportunity. These costs may be part of what you ask IMLS to pay for with federal funds, or what you will pay for as part of your cost share if you choose to include any. Again, the rules about allowability apply to both, so when completing your project budget, be sure to check that all costs you include, whether grant funds or cost share, are allowable. You are required to explain all of your proposed expenses in your application budget. Also in section D6A of the NANH Notice of Funding Opportunity, we provide a list of generally unallowable costs. These costs may not be part of what you ask IMLS funds to pay for, nor can they be included as part of your cost share. In fact, unallowable expenses can't show up anywhere in your proposal. As you prepare your application budget, it's a good idea to compare your list of proposed expenses against these lists of allowable and unallowable costs, as well as against the federal cost principles, which again can be found in 2 CFR Part 200, that part of the Code of Federal Regulations I mentioned a couple slides ago. Next up are application components. Your application will consist of a series of individual documents, and it's very important to make sure you prepare and submit everything necessary for your application to be considered complete. Application components fall into 3 categories in the NANH funding opportunity. The first is that of required documents. All applications must include the documents listed here. Omission of even just one can result in the exclusion of your application from further consideration. Also important to note are page limits. If you exceed the page limit specified in the Notice of Funding Opportunity, we must remove the extra pages before your application goes out for review. That means your reviewer may see a paragraph or sentence end in mid-air and will wonder about your planning skills and your attentiveness to detail. Make sure your content fits into the page limit specified, and make sure the number of pages holds when you convert your document to a PDF. 2 of the required forms are ones you'll download through grants.gov, and they are dynamic. By that, I mean that your answers to certain questions will determine which questions you see next. These are the IMLS Supplementary Information Form, including abstract, and the IMLS Museum Program Information Form. In the second category of application components is conditionally required documents. Some applicants must include 1, 2, or more of these, and it's important that you know which are required for your application. If you are a nonprofit organization that primarily serves and represents Native Hawaiians, then you must include your proof of nonprofit status issued by the IRS, as well as appropriate proof of eligibility documentation outlined in the Notice of Funding Opportunity. If you are using a federally negotiated indirect cost rate in your budget, then you must include a copy of your final rate agreement. If you create digital products during the course of your project, then you must complete and submit a digital products plan. If you're requesting support for conservation treatment, then you must include detailed condition reports and/or formal conservation treatment proposals. Just like the required documents, omission of even one of these can result in the exclusion of your application from further consideration. And please note that the term digital product includes anything like digitized and born digital content, resources or assets, software, research data, etc. If you're creating any of these types of materials, you must include the plan with your application. Appendix 4 of the Notice of Funding Opportunity contains further guidance for creating a digital products plan. The third group of application components is supporting documents. And here's a partial list of examples. Supporting documents are optional. You may submit some or none. We urge you to make good decisions here and include those that will supplement your proposal. This is not the place to introduce brand new information. Rather, as the name suggests, they should lend support to your project justification, work plan, and intended results that you've already spelled out in your application narrative. For example, have you identified a partner whose involvement is key to the project's success? If so, a letter of support or commitment would go a long way to reassuring reviewers that they are on board and the project will succeed. Pictures can help give reviewers, who may not be familiar with your institution, programs, collections, or community, a better idea of what you're describing within your narrative. Vendor quotes or equipment specifications show you've done some of the legwork in getting appropriate estimates for project costs. We recommend that you be respectful of your reviewer's time and avoid any temptation to include hundreds of pages of extraneous material that is not directly relevant to your project. Being judicious really does work to your benefit. So supporting documents can make or break an application. Include what is important and helpful and stop there. Now let's talk about the narrative of your proposal. You have 5 pages to cover 3 very important topics, and the Notice of Funding Opportunity provides lengthy guidance on what the narrative should include. You should organize your narrative using these 3 section headings and consider the NANH grant program goals and objectives you have selected as you develop it. So first is the project justification. What need, problem, or challenge will your project address, and how was it identified? Describe how you have used demographic information, economic circumstances, condition assessments, or other relevant data from reliable sources to define the need, problem, or challenge and develop the scope for your project. Who is the target group for your project, and how have they been involved in the planning? Target group refers to those who will be most immediately and positively affected by your project. Identify the number of individuals in the target group or in each target group if you identify more than one. And who are the ultimate beneficiaries for this project? Beneficiaries refers to those who are likely to be aided in the long term by your project. They may or may not be the same as your target group. Identify the number of individuals who will benefit from your project in the long term, if reliable and defensible counts are possible. Otherwise, describe the characteristics of the beneficiaries you expect to be served eventually by your project. In Section E of the Notice of Funding Opportunity, under Review Criteria, you will find a list of questions that reviewers are asked to answer when they review your proposal. It's a good idea to refer to these as you craft your narrative to be certain you are providing reviewers clear, solid information. You will see that these questions correspond fairly directly with the prompts you were given to write your narrative. Because the need, problem, or challenge is foundational in your application, keep these points in mind. The federal government wants its investment to result in something getting better. As you define your need, problem, or challenge, articulate what will get better as a result of your project as precisely as possible. Will someone learn something, develop a skill, change an attitude? Will members of your community be better able to work together to solve problems? Will collections be better cared for? Will their lifespan be extended? Will access to your collections and the information surrounding them be expanded? Identify why it is important that this particular change happens. Hone your problem definition carefully in clear, succinct terms, and gather and present data that supports your problem definition. If the project justification section was the why, the project works plan section is where you identify the who, what, when, and how. Who will do what activities when and using what resources. You should explain how you will track your progress towards achieving your intended results and what you'll do if you need to correct course. Note that we ask you to think about risks that are inherent in your particular project and to tell us how you've taken that into account in your planning. I'll say more about risks in a few minutes. Again, this is the list of questions in Section E of the Notice of Funding Opportunity that reviewers are asked to answer when they review your proposal. So make sure your narrative is answering these effectively. Your work plan will be built on activities, so it's important to be clear about what an activity is. An activity is something that someone does. It has a beginning and an end, just like projects, and you know when you've finished it because it doesn't need to be done anymore. It's no longer on your to-do list. An activity is not a goal, a result, or an outcome. Rather, it is something you do as part of striving to achieve those. You should aim for a reasonable level of granularity in identifying your activities. That might be hard, but strive for balance. Too much in your work plan becomes bogged down and confusing, but too little, and someone who is reading your application won't understand the who, when, what, and how of your project. We also ask you to think about risks that are inherent in your particular project and to tell us how you've taken that into account in your planning. Think of it as answering the question, what if X doesn't go according to plan? There is no checklist of risks, but every project has them. The best proposals will show that you are aware of them and have thought through a plan for dealing with them. Look at your activities and think about what could go wrong. Focus on the ones where your experience tells you, yes, that could happen, and identify steps you would take in response. For example, if you intend to hire someone into a grant-funded position to work on the project activities, what will you do if it takes longer than expected to find the right candidate, bring them on board, and train them? IMLS knows things go differently than expected. We just want you to prepare by identifying implementable options should they occur. The third section of your narrative should be devoted to articulating your project's intended results. This section is your chance to convince the reviewers that your project will result in something getting better. The need or problem you identified in your project justification will be addressed, and it will be diminished or eliminated altogether. Think about this question from the dual perspectives of advancing the museum's services of your tribe or institution, as well as ensuring that the federal investment made through this grant will generate benefits to society. How will you know that your project has been successful? How will you measure that success? If your project will generate tangible products, and most do, here's the opportunity to describe them and make the case that they will be useful. Last but not least, we ask that you tell us how you will sustain the benefit of the project. How will this improvement that you propose to make continue once your grant is over? What will the longer-term impact be? And again, here is the list of review questions that reviewers are asked to answer when they read and score the project results section of your narrative. These are found in Section E of the Notice of Funding Opportunity. We often hear that defining intended results and success measures is challenging for applicants, so it's worth spending a little bit of time on this here. Let's think back to the questions we referenced a couple slides ago when we talked about defining the need, problem, or challenge that your project is addressing. If you said someone will learn something, how will you know? If your problem related to segments of your community being better able to work together, how will you know when that has been achieved? If collections will be better cared for, how will you be sure and how will you measure better? If you're digitizing to expand accessibility, how will you know when you've done it? All of your results should tie back to your need, problem, or challenge. You may well experience tangential benefits and/or other positive outcomes, but make sure you identify them as in addition to and not instead of your original intended results. Reviewers are likely to see that as a disconnect. This focus on project results and measuring success in meaningful ways is not new, but it isn't necessarily easy either. There are many ways to define and measure success, and each situation is unique. To aid you in visualizing what success could look like for your project, we encourage you to consider using a logic model to explain your intended results and your plan for achieving them. Some NANH applicants use logic models, and reviewers appreciate their consciousness, their conciseness, and focus. There are many excellent resources available to help you construct a logic model, and among these are IMLS's Shaping Outcomes, a free online course developed in partnership with Indiana University, Purdue University of Indianapolis. It's available at the website on the screen, and it's customized to meet the needs of museum applicants. There are downloadable worksheets and numerous examples that you are likely to find relevant to your work. So to recap, your narrative has 3 sections: project justification, project work plan, and project results, and you have 5 pages for it. It's important to remember that the sections are all equally important. Write clearly, address what we ask you to address, and keep an eye on those review criteria. We're telling you here exactly what the reviewers will look for, so make it easy for them to find it and understand it. At the end of 2020, the government added a new requirement to all federal awards. Agencies are now required to measure the performance of awardees. This performance measurement requirement is different from project evaluation, which is typically included in a project proposal. Performance measurement tells us how good a job you did as a federal grantee. It helps IMLS understand, manage, and improve our grant programs and the assistance we provide to applicants and awardees. And it helps us inform internal stakeholders, such as IMLS leadership or key staff in our various offices, as well as external stakeholders, such as legislative and oversight committees, the media, or the general public, about our grant making. Project evaluation, by contrast, is all about your project's intended results or outcomes. The prompts for each section of your narrative we've just covered, project justification, work plan, and results, essentially provide an outline of your evaluation methods. We ask you what need you are addressing and what associated results do you want your project to have, how you will track progress toward achieving your intended results, and how the knowledge, skills, behaviors, or attitudes of your target audience will change as a result of your project. So now let's turn our focus to the performance measurement and how we will ask you to plan for and report on it. Section A3 of the NANH Notice of Funding Opportunity provides a sample chart which applicants may, but are not required, to use. On the left side of the chart are 4 commonly used performance measures that IMLS has adopted for this effort. Effectiveness, the extent to which activities contribute to achieving the intended results. Efficiency, how well resources such as funds, expertise, or time are used and costs are minimized while generating maximum value for the target group. Quality, how well the activities meet the requirements and expectations of the target group. And timeliness, the extent to which each task or activity is completed within the proposed timeframe. Across the top are information points that we're asking you to use in your statements with examples of each. For instance, with data we will collect are listed counts, costs, weights, volumes, temperatures, percentages, and hours, as well as qualitative observations, opinions, and feelings. For each performance measure, we provide a couple of examples addressing issues that might turn up in museum and library projects. Our intent was to make it easy for applicants to see the relationship between this request and the project they are proposing. The blank space is where we suggest applicants write their own performance measure statements, and the chart is constructed so it can expand to allow as much space as needed. We are looking for 1 statement for each required performance measure. You may provide more than 1 statement per measure if you wish. However, we do limit the performance measurement plan to 2 pages. At this point, I'd like to share a few tips based on our experiences with the NANH application submission process each year. First off, you must submit your application online through grants.gov. IMLS does not accept applications by mail or email. In order to register with grants.gov, you must have an active SAM.gov registration and UEI number. So make sure your registrations for both of these sites are complete and accounts are active, and that any necessary passwords are current. These registrations expire periodically, so do not wait until it's time to hit the submit button to check on them. You should coordinate with any other staff members, such as your authorized organization representative, who may hold the accounts and passwords you'll need to submit. Both the SAM.gov and grants.gov websites have robust help features and FAQs. If you run into technical issues with either of these sites, you should reach out to their help desks and request a tracking, case, or ticket number in order to document your issue and attempts at resolving it. Failure to have an active SAM.gov or grants.gov registration by the application deadline is not an excuse for submitting a late application. So again, start early. Our regulations state clearly that we can make grants only to eligible applicants that submit complete applications, including attachments, on or before the deadline. Those are the parameters we must follow as a federal agency. So here are some tips to ensure that you can too. Start early. Become familiar with grants.gov's workspace. This feature has been around for a few years, and now it's the only option. It's got many good elements, including upfront validation that allows you to correct errors prior to submission, and the opportunity to collaborate with others in creating and saving progress on your application. Consider starting with the workspace overview and check out their tutorials. Do your background research. Make it easy for the reviewers to see that you're up to date and know what you're talking about. You should revisit the NANH Notice of Funding Opportunity frequently and follow the narrative outline it provides. Use the headings, subheadings, or numbered sections to make it easy for reviewers to read. Avoid generalities, acronyms, and jargon. The people who will review your application are experts, but they may not be familiar with your particular institution's or field's shorthand, so make it easy for them to understand what you mean. Check your spelling, grammar, and math. An advantage to starting your application early is you can ask a colleague to review everything with fresh eyes before you submit. Ask them to act like a reviewer who's seeing everything for the first time. Be sure your application is complete. Check it against the table of application components in the Notice of Funding Opportunity, and then check it again. And submit to Grants.gov early so you can correct any errors and avoid any possible issues caused by technology challenges, forgotten passwords, or staff out on vacation the day of the submission deadline. We have also posted the narrative and schedule of completion, as well as digital products plans from 3 successful applications from 2022. To find these applications, go to the sample applications on the IMLS website and scroll down the page to find the NANH examples. Looking at these proposals might help clarify your own thinking about your proposal. This is the general grant cycle for the NANH program, so you can see what happens to your application once we receive it. IMLS staff will review it for completeness and eligibility, and you will hear from us via email if there are any problems. From January through March, experienced peer reviewers will provide scores and comments based on the criteria outlined in the NANH Notice of Funding Opportunity, and IMLS staff will examine the project budgets, institutional financials, and applicants' track records with past and current grants. We then prepare materials for the IMLS Deputy Director for Museums and the IMLS Director. By law, the Director has the authority and responsibility to make final award decisions, and this generally happens in May. In June, we notify all applicants by email of the award decisions and provide the scores and comments created by their reviewers. And on July 1st, 2023, the funded projects will begin. Thank you again for your interest in IMLS and in the Native American Native Hawaiian Museum Services Grant Program. We hope you found the information in this webinar helpful. Here's the contact information for the 2 IMLS staff assigned to the NANH program. Jennifer and I are happy to answer any questions you may have. We actually have an easy and preferred way for you to schedule a call with either of us straight from the NANH program landing page. So please feel free to use that tool and reach out. Good luck, and we look forward to seeing your application in November.